Kevin and Diane had been married for 10 years and still loved each other deeply. However, Kevin didn't get along with Diane's parents, so she was planning a 2-week visit to them while Kevin went camping with some coworkers. Before leaving, Kevin offered to help Diane with her suitcase. "Would you mind, darling? It's not too heavy, but I need to grab my handbag. Take this suitcase to the taxi, and I'll be down in a moment." Kevin placed the suitcase in the trunk of the waiting taxi and waited for Diane to join him. When she appeared, he asked, "I could give you a ride to the train station if you'd prefer. I don't need to meet the others for a while." "It's fine, honey, the cab is fine. You can wash the cups before you head out and make sure everything is locked up, okay?" "Yes, dear, I'm not an idiot," Kevin joked, though he could tell Diane wasn't amused. With that, Diane climbed into the taxi, and it drove off. Kevin returned to the house, finishing up the kitchen when he heard a knock at the door. He dried his hands and went to answer it. A delivery man stood outside, holding a package. "Mr. K. Fairwater?" "Yes, I am," Kevin said. "Can I help you?" "I have a package for you. Could I see some ID? I need to verify you're the person I'm handing this to." Kevin went into the living room, retrieved 2 forms of ID, and showed them to the delivery man. The man examined them before handing Kevin a form to sign, confirming he was now responsible for the contents of the package. Kevin thanked him, took the package, and closed the door. He quickly opened the box, revealing a can of spray labeled Hugglebug spray. Kevin had been planning this for months, and now he finally had the chance to try it. He had used a sample of Diane's DNA to create this special spray and hoped it worked as advertised. Knowing Diane would be out of town for the next 2 weeks, Kevin realized the spray would last for a few days. He felt guilty about lying to her, but he was about to spend a week as Diane. Kevin wasn't naive enough to think he could pass as a woman, he was just too tall and muscular. But when he saw the ad for this spray, he felt hope for the first time in a long while. He had kept his desire to transform into a woman hidden from Diane, reading stories online and visiting transformation sites to learn more. Still, he had never been able to truly look like a woman in a dress. But now, with the spray, he was about to change that. In the bedroom, Kevin undressed and sprayed the solution on his body, from head to toe, even in his mouth. There was no taste to it, and for a moment, he felt ridiculous. As he stood there waiting, he began to think it was all a scam. "Typical," he muttered. "I'm such a fool." He started toward the bathroom to wash off the spray but suddenly felt lightheaded. He grabbed onto the furniture for support. When he reached the bed, he collapsed onto it. "What's happening? I feel smaller?" He passed out. When he woke up, everything felt different. His chest felt heavier, and when he touched it, he was shocked to find 2 soft mounds of flesh. Looking down, Kevin saw that his body had changed. His vision was now blocked by long, dark hair, and his hands were much smaller, devoid of the hair they once had, save for his head and a small patch of hair near his lower body. In disbelief, he stood up and stumbled to the mirror. Staring back at him was Diane, only it was Kevin's face in her body. His shock deepened as he moved a hand, and the person in the mirror copied the gesture. It worked. Kevin, now in Diane's body, spent some time studying her new form, not recognizing it at all. He walked into the bathroom for a shower, feeling the water against his skin in a way he never had before. It was an entirely new sensation, and when his hand ventured lower, the feeling was unlike anything he had ever experienced. After the shower, he looked around for something to wear. As Kevin, he had always wanted to wear the clothes Diane had, but his size had always been a problem. Now, in Diane's body, things felt different, but even her wardrobe was much too small. Walking over to the dresser, she opened the drawer filled with Diane's panties and selected a pastel pink pair, finding the matching bra. She walked over to the bed and began putting them on, noticing how everything felt new. Her skin was much more sensitive to touch now. She quickly understood why women wore bras. The weight on her chest was noticeable and impossible to ignore. Once dressed, she looked for a dress to wear. In the wardrobe, Kevin found a lovely floral summer dress. After putting it on, she went to the vanity to fix her hair. Diane had always kept it simple, only brushing it since it naturally curled. The spray had made her the exact replica of Diane, even down to the hair. Diane didn't wear much makeup, as she had great skin, and applying too much made her appear a bit too dark for her usual style. All that was left to complete the outfit were shoes and a handbag. Kevin found a pair of low-heeled sandals in the wardrobe, easy to walk in. After putting them on, she took a few steps around the room, making sure she could walk comfortably. Looking one last time in the mirror, Kevin, now in Diane's body, decided she was ready to go shopping. But before leaving the house, she went to find Diane's spare purse. Diane had once lost it, then replaced it with new ID, only to later find the original purse again. Kevin was relieved, as it worked out perfectly for what she needed to do. The only remaining task was to open a second bank account in both their names, allowing Kevin to get a credit card in Diane's name. As she gazed at her reflection, Kevin, now Diane, said, "All right, let's go shopping." Stepping out of the house, she felt a little nervous, aware of people looking at her. At first, she thought they must know who she really was, but as she continued walking, she realized it was the men who were staring, and it wasn't out of disgust, it was desire. Wandering around town was surprisingly enjoyable, moving from shop to shop, admiring dresses and even trying a few on. Looking at her watch, Kevin decided it was time for lunch. As she walked down the street, a feeling nagged at her that someone might be following her. When she looked around, there was no one she recognized. Shaking off the feeling, Kevin found a cozy little place to eat. She looked around for a table in the corner but realized all the small ones were at the front. A waiter approached. "Good afternoon, Mississippi. Would you like a table?" "Yes, please." "Just one?" "Yes, thank you." Kevin felt nervous, unsure of what to say since everything was still so new to her. She was scared of making a mistake and revealing her true identity. The waiter led her to a table at the front, pulling out the chair for her, which was something new for Kevin to experience. He handed her a menu, saying he'd return to take her order when she was ready. As she scanned the menu, Kevin heard someone call out the name Diane. It took a moment to realize that it was her being called. She looked up to see who it was. A hand waved at her, and when the person moved, Kevin recognized it was Alice, Diane's sister-in-law. Alice seemed surprised at first, but Kevin decided to play it cool and hope Alice wouldn't linger too long. Alice walked over, accompanied by a man who couldn't stop staring at Diane. "Hi, Diane. I thought you were heading to your parents'." Kevin paused for a moment before answering, "I'm still going, just not for a couple of days. I have a few things to sort out first." Alice seemed satisfied with the answer, and Kevin felt relieved. Alice waved over the waiter and asked for a table for 3. The waiter led them to a larger table. As they sat down, Alice introduced the man. "Diane, this is Dylan Smith, an old friend of mine." Kevin extended her hand, saying, "Nice to meet you, Dylan. Do you live around here?" Dylan shook her hand, still eyeing her with curiosity. "The pleasure's mine, my dear." "Yes, I live nearby." Kevin felt her cheeks flush as Alice continued chatting, telling Kevin about Dylan. As she listened, Kevin realized she didn't recall Alice ever mentioning a person named Dylan before. But Alice did know a lot of people, so Kevin assumed she just hadn't paid enough attention when Alice had talked about him. The meal was going smoothly, and Kevin was really starting to get into the role. For some reason, she felt a strong sense of attraction toward the man sitting across from her. She attributed it to the female hormones in her body. As they finished eating, Alice said, "Come on, Diane, let's freshen up." It took Kevin a moment to realize that Alice was talking to her. Oddly enough, it looked like Dylan was about to stand up but then hesitated. Kevin assumed it was just out of politeness, standing for two women. When they reached the restroom, Alice said, "I think he's really into you, Diane." "What do you think?" "Alice, I'm happily married to your brother, in case you've forgotten." "Well, you know what they say, when the cat's away, the mice will play. Besides, it's never stopped you before, has it?" Alice chuckled as she said this. Kevin started wondering what she meant by that, but she couldn't ask outright, fearing it would raise suspicion. Instead, she replied, "Well, people change, don't they?" Alice smiled knowingly and said, "People do change, but some things stay the same." She kissed Kevin on the cheek and began reapplying her makeup. Once they were both ready, they returned to the table, where Dylan was standing, waiting. The bill had already been paid. Kevin offered to pay him back, but Dylan simply said, "It's the least I can do for two such beautiful ladies." "Thank you, Dylan. Diane and I would love to invite you over for coffee and a chat, if you're interested." "I'd love that. It'll be nice to spend more time with such delightful company." Kevin was still trying to figure out Alice's intentions. She had never mentioned inviting Dylan over, but she was known to make decisions on her own without consulting anyone. When they left the restaurant, they stood outside while Dylan looked for a taxi and quickly flagged one down. As they climbed in, Dylan gave the driver directions, which took Kevin by surprise. She looked at Alice, silently asking how Dylan knew where she lived. Before she could speak, Alice replied, "I told him where you live while we were walking out." Kevin couldn't recall this, but she dismissed it, as it had been noisy when they left the restaurant. The taxi pulled up outside the house, and they got out. Alice paid the driver, and they walked up to the door. Kevin unlocked it and invited them in. Seeing the box with the Hugglebug spray, she took it into the bedroom. When she returned to the living room, Alice was about to make coffee, so Kevin offered to help. Alice waved her off, saying, "Diane, you stay and keep our guest company. I'll call you if I need any help, okay?" "Okay, but I'm not sure you'll find everything you need for the drinks," Kevin said. "I've made drinks here plenty of times. If I didn't know you better, I'd swear you weren't who you say you are." Kevin laughed. "That's just silly." She thought for a while, but couldn't remember Diane ever mentioning that Alice had been over. Then again, Diane did a lot of things she never told Kevin about. He couldn't say much, considering the trick he was trying to pull off. He began to wonder if it had been a good idea to look so much like Diane, but it was too late to turn back now. Kevin started talking to Dylan, trying to distract herself from the fact that she was in deeper than she had planned. She couldn't stop thinking about what Diane would say when Alice began asking how much Dylan liked her when they first met, and how Diane would respond by saying she'd never met anyone named Dylan. Dylan was a handsome man with a kind demeanor, similar to Kevin's own personality when she was in her male form. He wasn't the most talkative guy, though, and he didn't like talking about himself. The conversation always seemed to circle back to Kevin/Diane. Alice came back into the room with a tray and placed it on the coffee table. "How are you two getting along?" she asked. "I could hear you talking." Alice handed out the drinks and began reminiscing about her and Kevin growing up, painting Kevin as quite the little troublemaker. Kevin wanted to interrupt, but she knew that if she did, Alice would realize something was off. So, she quietly listened, laughing along at some of the stories Alice shared. As the afternoon passed, Kevin was becoming more accustomed to being in Diane's body. Alice turned to Kevin and said, "How about we go out tonight and hit the town? Dylan would love to be shown around, and I know you haven't been out in a while." Kevin tried to decline, but Alice wasn't having any of it. She said she would look for something to wear from Diane's wardrobe since it would take too long to go home and change. Kevin reluctantly agreed, then asked, "What about Dylan? What's he going to wear?" "He's about the same size as Kevin, so let him borrow something from his side of the closet." Kevin led Dylan to their bedroom and showed him where Kevin's clothes were, saying, "My husband has some nice things. Feel free to try on whatever you like. He won't mind." Kevin then went to the bathroom to take a bath and freshen up. She started filling the tub with water and added some bath oil. Once it was ready, she climbed in and began to relax. She could have easily fallen asleep in the warm water, but as she started to drift off, there was a knock at the door. "Diane, I've picked out some clothes for you to try on tonight. When you're out of the bath, I'll blow dry and style your hair, okay?" "Yes, thanks. I'll be out in about 10 minutes. Lying in the bath, Kevin wondered why Alice was helping her get dressed for a night out as Diane. Not that she was going to complain, after all, she could use all the help she could get. After finishing her bath, Kevin dried off and walked back to the bedroom. Alice had already used the shower in the spare room. Dylan wasn't in sight, so Kevin assumed he must have found something to wear and gone back to the living room. "Where's Dylan, Alice?" "He found a nice suit and changed in the spare room. He's waiting for us in the living room. Now come over here and sit down so I can do your hair." Kevin sat there for about 15 minutes while Alice dried and styled her hair. She sat in front of the mirror, trying to learn as much as she could from Alice's technique. Alice did a fantastic job, and then she did Kevin's makeup. She didn't use much, since Diane didn't need much at all. When Alice finished, she told Kevin to get dressed. Kevin walked over to the bed and was surprised to see the outfit Alice had chosen for her to wear. "Alice, I don't think this is the right outfit for tonight." "Diane, you'll look amazing in it. Just get ready already." The outfit was laid out on the bed, and Kevin could immediately tell it was the same one Diane had bought for a more daring occasion. It was a black PVC dress that didn't cover much, but Diane had always looked stunning in it, and Alice was confident Kevin would look just as good. The outfit was entirely black. First, Kevin picked up the thong, which didn't cover much, but was better than nothing. Next, she grabbed the matching bra. Kevin had to make this look convincing, as Diane had worn such outfits often. The next piece was the garter belt. Kevin had watched Diane put this on many times, so she knew exactly how it worked. She fastened the garter belt around her waist, running the straps under her panties to make it easier to use the restroom later. She sat on the bed to put on the stockings. Once the stockings were on, she stood up, making sure everything was in place, and then it was time for the dress. Kevin remembered how long it took Diane to get into it, but she had no choice but to do it now. Alice helped her pull the dress on and laced up the built-in corset. Kevin had to take small breaths as she adjusted to the tightness, but after a few minutes, it started to feel manageable. When she saw herself in the mirror, it looked like she had been covered in liquid black, sexy and sleek. "Come on, Diane, put on the boots, and let's make Dylan's jaw drop." Kevin turned to see what Alice meant by boots and nearly dropped her jaw herself. Alice was holding a pair of thigh-high black PVC boots with at least 5-inch heels. "They're not mine, where did you get them?" "Of course they're yours, silly. Don't you remember buying them?" Kevin had never seen Diane wear these boots before and certainly hadn't bought them. But he didn't want to give Alice any reason to doubt, so he replied, "Silly me, I must have forgotten about buying them," letting out a little giggle. Alice didn't seem to notice anything off, so Kevin assumed she had bought it. Alice handed him the boots and watched as he struggled to pull the first one on, then zipped it up. He did the same with the second one. Before even standing up, he could feel the height of the heels. Taking a deep breath, Kevin got to his feet but nearly toppled forward. Alice quickly stepped in to catch him. "Be careful, I don't want to spend the night in the emergency room," she said, laughing lightly. "I think I should wear something else." "I'm going to kill myself in these," Kevin muttered. "You'll be fine, you just need to get used to them," Alice insisted. Kevin wasn't so sure, but he didn't want to make a scene. He started walking around the room in the boots, or, more accurately, stumbling around. Alice continued finishing up her preparations. "So, how do I look, Diane?" Alice asked, turning to her. "Wow, you look really good." "That dress fits you better than it ever did me," Kevin replied, though it was far from the truth. Alice's red dress was very tight and complemented her black stockings and red shoes with 3-inch heels. She was a bit taller than Diane, so with Kevin's 5-inch boots, they were about the same height. "Thanks, Diane, but I know you're just saying that." "Well, what do you say we go hit the town and make all the men drop to their knees?" "Sounds good. Do you think Dylan will like what I'm wearing?" "I don't want him to think I'm, well, you know." "Diane, you don't look like that at all. You look sexy, hot, but not like that. Stop worrying and grab your purse." With that, they left the bedroom and went to join Dylan. In the living room, Dylan was sitting with a glass of white wine. Alice cleared her throat, poorly, and it got Dylan's attention just as he took a sip of his wine. His reaction to seeing Kevin was to spit the wine out and choke on the bit left in his mouth. "Wow, you two look stunning. I think I'm going to be the luckiest man out tonight." Alice and Kevin walked over to the coffee table, where they were handed glasses of wine. Diane's nerves got the best of her, and she nearly downed her glass in one go. "Diane, I hope you're not planning to drink like that all night. You won't be able to walk in an hour," Alice warned. "I'll be fine, Alice." "And no, I don't plan on drinking much at all," Kevin replied. Alice giggled lightly and said, "I think you'll want to drink more than you think." She shot a glance at Dylan, whose expression turned to a quiet, almost warning look. Kevin assumed she was just being paranoid. "Well, Diane, Dylan, are you two ready to hit the town?" Alice asked. "No, but let's get it over with," Kevin answered. "Ladies, shall we leave and have some fun?" Dylan chimed in. "Lead the way, kind sir," Alice said with a playful smile. They all left the house and headed to the town. Dylan hailed a taxi, and once they arrived, Alice immediately took charge, with Kevin and Dylan following. Kevin struggled to keep up, needing to tell Alice to slow down several times. When they reached their first stop, a restaurant, Kevin couldn't help but ask, "Alice, why are we here?" "I thought we were going to hit the town, as you put it." "We are, but I thought we could eat first," Alice replied. So they went in and found a table with the help of the waiter. The food was good, but Kevin couldn't eat much. Her dress was too tight to allow for a full meal. By the time they finished, Kevin felt more intoxicated than expected. "The Hugglebug spray must have affected more than just my looks," she thought. "My tolerance for alcohol is definitely lower now." After the restaurant, Alice led them to a nightclub. Dylan was holding Kevin's arm to steady her as she walked, trying not to trip in the high heels. As they walked toward the club, Diane noticed the men's eyes lingering on her with desire and interest. It made her uncomfortable, but what caught her attention more was the way the women were looking at Dylan. A pang of jealousy hit her. "Am I falling for this strange man, or is it just the alcohol?" she wondered. "Why do I feel so connected to him? It's like I've known him longer than just a day." Alice stopped outside an upscale club and turned to Dylan and Diane, saying, "I think we should go in here. It's a nice place, no rowdy crowds, so we'll actually be able to enjoy ourselves." Dylan and Diane followed her inside. It was becoming easier for Diane to walk in the boots, though they were starting to make her feet ache. Alice led them to the bar, and Dylan ordered a glass of wine for each of them. Diane found it odd that a man was drinking wine, but Dylan didn't seem bothered by it. They found a quiet corner with a table to sit at. Diane was relieved, as her feet were starting to really hurt. Alice chatted with Dylan, but Diane couldn't make out what they were talking about. After a while, Dylan looked at Diane and grinned, prompting her to smile back. The conversation drifted on for a bit, then a slow song began to play. Dylan stood up and held out his hand to Diane. She hesitated, but he wasn't going to take no for an answer. He led her to the dance floor and pulled her close. Even with the boots, Diane was still several inches shorter than him. He felt so warm against her, and for a moment, she just wanted to keep dancing like that all night. Dylan began running his hand gently up and down her back, and then he lowered his head to her neck, pressing soft kisses there. Diane's body reacted instantly. She felt a heat building, a tingling sensation that traveled down her back and to the place where her body had once known such feelings. Her whole being was alive with desire, and she knew how to fuel it. But with all the willpower she had left, she pulled away and said, "Dylan, no. I can't do this with you. You're a great guy, but I'm married." "I know you're married, but what's so wrong about this?" he asked. "I love my partner too much to just flirt with anyone who comes along." Diane stood there, looking up at him. She thought he was going to try kissing her, but instead, he moved his lips to her ear and whispered, "I'm glad to hear you say that, Kevin. I would have been very upset if you'd let it go any further." Kevin froze, her stomach dropping at the sound of her male name. Her heart pounded as she searched for the right words. "What did you just call me?" "Kevin, I know it's you." Suddenly, a wave of nausea swept over Kevin, and the room spun before everything went dark. When she woke, she found herself lying across the backseat of a taxi, with Alice and Dylan seated beside her. Her head rested on Alice's lap. She looked up at Alice, who was looking down at her with concern. "What happened, Alice? How did I end up in a car?" "You passed out in the club, so we decided to call it a night," Alice explained. The taxi stopped outside the house. Dylan helped her out, carrying her inside and placing her gently on the sofa. He looked down at her with genuine worry. "Are you okay? I didn't mean to scare you." That's when it hit her. Dylan knew who she really was. "Dylan, how do you know I'm not Diane?" "Because I am Diane," he replied. "I can tell you're not me." "Diane." "But how?" Kevin asked, confused. "Let me take those boots off, then I'll make us some coffee. After that, I'll tell you the whole story, okay?" Kevin nodded, still in a daze, watching as Dylan, now revealing himself as Diane, walked into the kitchen. Alice sat down beside Kevin and put an arm around her. She tried to comfort her, but Kevin was too shocked to think straight. All she could do was cry. "Hey, come on. What's all this crying about, Kev? I just don't understand what's happening today. How long have you and Diane known? Let's wait for the real Diane to come back, and then we'll tell you everything from the beginning, okay?" "Yeah, I guess so." Kevin rested her head on Alice's shoulder, waiting for Diane to return with the coffee. Kevin, your coffee is ready." "Huh? What?" "Come on, Kevin. Drink this, and I'll explain everything." Kevin slowly opened her eyes to find Dylan standing over her, holding a cup of coffee. She sat up and took a sip, feeling the warmth spread through her. Dylan sat down beside her and began explaining how she had known for a long time that Kevin wanted to be a woman. She had been unsure of how to deal with it. "Kevin, I was scared of losing you, so I thought if I ignored it, it would go away. But it didn't. I started looking at the sites you visited and reading the stories, hoping to understand why you felt the way you did." "I never wanted to hurt you, Diane," Kevin replied, her voice heavy with regret. "I love you more than anything, but now I feel like I've ruined everything." "Why do you say that?" Diane asked, concerned. "I lied to you when I said I was going camping with the guys. After 10 years of marriage, I can tell when you're lying. When you said you were going camping, I knew something was off. So, I checked your computer and found the order for the Hugglebug spray." Kevin felt her stomach twist. She lowered her head in shame, not knowing what to say. Diane gently lifted her chin, looking into her eyes, and then kissed her deeply. "I still love you," Diane whispered. "Why do you think I look like this? I wanted you to feel everything a woman does. But I didn't want you with anyone else, so I ordered the spray to be the man who could give you pleasure." "You really don't mind?" Kevin asked softly. "You still love me? How could anyone not love you in that outfit?" Diane smiled. For the first time since they had come home, Kevin laughed. So that's why Alice made me wear this dress, and those boots? The whole outfit was Alice's and my idea. We wanted you to feel really sexy. I felt like a hooker, Kevin admitted, but now I understand how much effort goes into looking good. Alice stood up to leave, but Kevin called out, Alice, where are you going? I think you two need some time alone, Alice replied, heading toward the door. You can stay in the spare room if you want, Kevin offered. It's pretty late to be heading home. As long as you don't mind, I'd love that, Alice said, smiling. Alice went to the spare room, and Diane and Kevin retreated to their own. That night, Diane showed Kevin how incredible intimacy could feel from the opposite gender's perspective. The next morning, Kevin woke up feeling more alive than ever. She glanced at the man beside her, still asleep. Gently, she leaned over and kissed him on the forehead. Thank you for showing me how much you love me. As she moved away, a strong arm pulled her back down into the bed. You're not going anywhere that easily, girl. I want more of that passionate love, Dylan teased. Kevin giggled as Diane tickled her mercilessly. Later that day, Alice went home, and Kevin and Diane spent the best vacation they had ever had, enjoying each other's company. They still had some of the spray left for future use.